And I'm pulling up my agenda, sorry. And this is to talk about the clerk of the school board position. So as you know, we have had in your in the attachments to this work session, you will see 3 documents. One is the ad that ran, one are the job specifications, and one are the performance specifications. I want to tell you that before we go through this, and this work session was to kind of ensure that, and also I want you all to know that I have had Ms. Goddard look over this to make sure that there's nothing that has changed or nothing that she felt needed to be added. And of course, you know, not every job spec or, you know, ad can contain everything, but she felt it was pretty on target. So the ad that ran, when did we first put the ad? When did it start running? June 10th. June 10th, the ad that ran, 70 applicants have applied. We believe we have 20 qualified candidates. 18 of those candidates have a BA, and I guess 8 additional candidates have a master's. So we have a nice qualified pool right now, we believe. And what I'd like to do today is to look at the job specifications and also the performance expectations to see if there's anything that you all want to change, update. And we have Catherine and Sean here, Kathleen and Sean here from our HR to help us through this process. So I will take questions. Ms. Strauss.
Okay, I believe that we have, at the bottom it says revised October 2006, and I think we have just revised some of this, right?
No.
No? So this is exactly the way it was in 2006?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. All right. That's it. I wasn't. And I do have a question. We call it executive assistant. I was expecting to have it say clerk.
Okay.
We could say executive assistant and clerk or clerk. But I know VSBA and NSBA, I believe, designates it as clerk to the board.
Okay. Questions? Comments? Mr. McLean.
So one thing we were just discussing over here is the title of the position. And I think it's somewhat misleading. I think it should be clerk and executive assistant
That's what I think.
as it is listed on the website, as opposed to executive assistant, because that attracts a different kind of candidate.
Exactly. I think clerk is the understanding, at least the common understanding clerk is that it's the senior person in support of the school board with actual ability, with requirements of the job that are there to satisfy state code. So it is an important support position.
Ms. Smith.
So I guess my question to our staff members is there a reason that it just says executive assistant to the school board and doesn't reference clerk in the job title?
So the process of having the title be something different is really germane to each program manager out there. So if you as a board say you want it to be clerk to the school board, we'll have to push that. There's actually paperwork that we have to complete and send it to our classification area to change it. We can't just change it. There's a process. So, for example, if you were to say you wanted to change certain parts of the job specification, we would take note of it, but there's an official process that we have to go through to request that it's changed. So essentially what we would be doing is if we've advertised this on June 10th, we would have advertised it initially with the title Executive Assistant to the School Board, and then we would, what I'm hearing you say is that you want that title to be changed like now to clerk, so the title would change. Is that what we're saying?
Well, some of them said it, but, you know, we have to get consensus. So we're having a discussion right now before we go and just make decisions. Ms. Smith, go ahead.
So I'm going to have a different viewpoint. I don't think we need to add clerk to the title. I think it's clearer when somebody is looking to be an executive assistant, but if you look at definition, the second part of that sentence says, acts in the legal capacity of the clerk of the school board. It's right there near the top. I don't think it's necessary to change it into the title. I mean, the job is being an executive assistant, and then the clerk part is already referenced. So I think it's fine the way it is.
Ms. Strauss?
Okay, I will back off. I don't want to have to go back through a process. It's not worth. I was just a little startled when I saw the title. But as long as it is mentioned as acts in the legal capacity of the clerk, because I know that that's actually how it is treated within VSBA and NSBA. So,
Mr. Stork?
Well, that's my issue. I thought there was something in the law that says we have a clerk, and so I think it has to have that in the title. So I don't know how you get away with that. So I'll push back on you guys to say, what's legal say about that, because somebody needs to do the research on codes and law in Virginia about how it addresses that, because it is a formal position in the code and law of Virginia. So if somebody says we don't need it, okay, that's fine. I guess we can do that, but just. And if we do need it, just put executive assistant and clerk to the school board and move on, But I think I want somebody to tell me legally that we don't have to have that in there, because I'm shocked that it's not in there now. I just assumed that was part of the title.
All right, so I'm here. Oh, go ahead. Ms. Schultz. Sorry.
So this position to me does not read like what the position does. And I think that's my issue, is that there's just a fundamental disconnect. First of all, it doesn't say anywhere here really that they manage the office. It says it supervises, evaluates, and instructs lower graded employees as assigned. No, this person is responsible for managing the school board office. It's managing, the schedules, the very complex scheduling, and the not only that, the supervisory nature of other employees. So that element seems to me to be missing here, and I agree. I don't know who said it about attracting a different. A different type of candidate or applicant, especially with it only needing 6 years of experience. I mean, I cannot imagine somebody who has 6 years of kind of executive assistant ability and just walking in and running an office of, and managing the workflow, workflow processes, documents, people, protocol, events. I mean, there are a lot of moving pieces here that this does not seem to me, it almost seems to more comport with an EAA, frankly.
Ms. Evans?
I just looked back to see what Pam Goddard's title is, and she, clerk is in her title. So I guess executive assistant and clerk to the school board is at least what her signature says. So I guess I think all other things being equal, we should have that be consistent with what we have now.
Mr. Stork?
I agree with Ms. Schultz that I think it understates the span of control and responsibilities of the position, and I think the word managed, in my mind, has to be in here. So I don't think it's supervision. In my mind, supervision is not as comprehensive a responsibility, and clearly implies more day-to-day guidance from a manager, whereas the school board office itself doesn't get day-to-day guidance from the chairman or anybody else for that matter. I mean, we're looking to that individual. Plus, the span of control is such that we're talking about enough staff people that I think clearly it would be more managerial in its scope and responsibility. So I I don't see how that's not. I don't know. I guess I would probably ask Kathleen how you all rate different positions in the system in general. But I mean, is there some kind of tiering process between supervisor, and manager, or why is that? Why wouldn't that fall into it? Interchange.
We use those terms pretty interchangeably. And I think whatever direction we go in, we'll want to make sure, I hate to keep going back to classification, but we want to make sure we do that, because depending on how we word it, it could change the grade of the position. So you could craft language that would essentially make someone say, well, this needs to be a US 30. If this is the direction that we're going in, I'm not saying not to. I'm just saying that as we craft the language, we'll want to take that into consideration and then really look at whether the current language does get at some of it, because it does say essential to the administrative organization and management of the school board activities and meetings. It says that at the beginning of the typical tasks.
But the key, and I read that as well, I think the key point that I took from that was that it talked about the school board management, but there's a school board office that is, and that's what's not
Okay.
distinctive enough, I think, in that
Okay.
front end. And I think that's really what I'm referring to in terms of managing the school board
Got
office.
it. Okay.
And
The
clearly, the other
administrative
part of
function.
it, working with the school board, I would concur with the latter part of that too. But
Okay.
there's a front end that's not included.
We could.
Dan, specifically talk about the sentence. Where are you talking about adding managing the school board office? Where, or do you have a specific place?
I was just, under the typical task, it refers to, that's the first line, makes decisions essentially the administrative organization and management of school board activities and meetings. I think what I'm trying to distinguish is that, we have a school board office that somebody manages, and it's not the chairman of the school board, even though technically it is. It's done by a staff person. It's not unlike what we have in our internal audit and soon to be our general auditor. I mean, those are managerial responsibilities that ultimately report back to the school board, but they are separate areas of responsibility and activity and action. There's a crossover clearly here between that, what this clerk, executive assistant, whatever you want to call them, there is that then crossover to the management of the school board activities themselves, but I think we have a separate kind of organization that we view as responsible for supporting our operation.
Madam Chair, may I interject? Just
Yes, Mr.
whether,
Mann.
because as I was hearing what Mr. Stork was saying, Mr. Stork, what if you did take a look at the very last, sort of like last clause of the typical tasks?
Of which part, I'm sorry?
Typical tasks.
Okay.
At the last clause,
Manage the school board office, budget,
and then right below that.
oversees administrative activities and operations assigned to the school board office. That's clearly what the typical tasks are, sure. I guess my concern is that I don't think of an executive assistant. I see that as being and maybe this is more how industry does it versus how it's done elsewhere, but executive assistant to me is more of a one-to-one responsibility. You typically you serve one or two people, and you have really very little or limited supervisory responsibilities. And that's part of my.
I mean, I agree adding clerk, executive assistant and clerk to the school board. But whether that last clause under
I
the
think it
typical
addresses
text address your concern.
Yeah, it definitely includes
that's-
the relative issue I was raising.
All right, thank you for pointing that out, Mr. Moon. Do you have something else? All right, Ms. Smith.
So from where I'm sitting, I don't think we need to add words. The thing that Il Young mentioned, I had highlighted, and I was going to point that out, oversees the administrative activities and operations. I think it does define the job and the parts of the job. I guess my question is, if we decide to change this, how does this affect our timeline to choose a clerk? Because I'm stepping back and looking at this in priorities of the job at hand and where we need to go. To me, this covers the activities of a clerk, and I'm concerned that we're going to get into a process that we're not going to be able to complete when the most important thing to me is to hire a clerk for the school board.
If we go through classification department to change some wording, it will delay the process. I can almost guarantee that.
So I have to tell you, it's not worth it to me. This is comprehensive. We have the different tasks written here. They're typical tasks, illustrative only. The supervision received and given has supervises, evaluates, instructs, and assists lower graded employees as assigned. I think it's all in here. I want to make sure we have time at the other end. If we go through this process and we interview and we don't find somebody we like, I want more time to do that. I don't see it gets us anything to change any words in this. I think it's good, and we'll get what we want.
Thank you, Ms. Smith. Before I go to Ms. Strauss, I just want to alert you to, I'll reread a memo that I did send out on the 10th about when I sent out the Jobwood post, that right now, so where we are in this process, the advertisements has been posted for, well, not quite for 35 days, but we're in that process. Early to mid-July, school board members who are interested in participating in resume screening will review those resumes received to date. Mid to late July, interview questions formulated with the assistants, and that can be early July at this point, I think, as well. And Sean has already sent me some of those. I haven't looked at them yet, but we can send those out. And then mid to late July, we can schedule a first round of interviews with school board members who are interested in participating in this interview process. For, as of today, what HR is telling us, 20 qualified applicants. So that's where we are. I just wanted to point that out. Janie.
I might suggest something that might not back us into a reclassification, since in that first paragraph, it always says acts in legal capacity. I would still feel better if under the title, in parentheses, you repeat again, just under the title, acts in the legal capacity of clerk of the school board. That doesn't change the classification, but at least I think it's prominent in the title. And then it's repeated again in the first paragraph. But I would feel better seeing that just in parentheses, right under executive assistant of the school board, paren, acts in legal capacity, the clerk of the school board. So that anybody seeing it would understand that this is what this pertains to. And I think that would not kick it into some long process. Okay?
Mr. Stork.
That's fine. I do want, as a next step, I do want an attorney opinion about the title and the role. I think that's essential to what we're doing.
I have a question. If Ms. Goddard is currently, that's her current title, and we didn't catch that. So if her current title is, what did you say? It was executive assistant and clerk to the school board, and the person acting in the capacity who's, gone through this, you're still saying we would have to reclassify if we added that one word?
Well, the first thing we would want to do is go into our official system called Lawson to see what her official title is there, okay? Changing or inserting the word clerk, executive assistant, and clerk to the school board, I don't think we're talking an extensive period of time to do that. I mean, we can contact D. Holly Brown, like, by tomorrow, and ask her what the time frame would be. As long as we're not getting into changing the function of the job, we're going to be okay. And I don't think we're going to be in a situation where we're delaying getting your candidate on board. But I think a takeaway item for us is to tell you what her official title is.
Right.
I looked it up in Lawson today and forgot because I just had a million other things going on.
Okay.
But we can tell you that.
Okay. Ms. Schultz?
So I'm still with what Mr. Stork said, either in the first line, well, not either, I think it ought to be in both places. Under typical tasks, the management of school board activities and meetings, it's missed that it runs the school board office. And then under supervision, supervises, evaluates, instructs, and assists lower grade employees as assigned, may provide guidance and assistance to, no, not may, provides. I mean, this person is running an entire office. And so, I don't think it's hashing over words. I think these are important. Words have power, and I think if you're saying that you're running school board activities, that's different than saying you're in charge of managing the school board office.
Ms. Smith?
Okay, I read that second sentence as people outside of the school board office may provide guidance and assistance to full-time, part-time, and/or hourly employees, state and local officials, school system advocates, and the general public as required. Those are the people outside of the office that she might provide that to. The first part of that is the people in the office.
I understand
Those are
that,
assigned.
I understand that, Ms. Smith, but nowhere here in either the supervision received or given or in the typical task does it say this person is responsible for running the school board office. It doesn't exist.
And oversees the administrative activities and operations assigned to the school board office.
Last sentence. That's what it is. Ms. Strauss, and then let's wrap this up as we...
Yeah, I am not much in favor of rearranging the typical tasks. I think when we begin to interview and look for our next executive assistant, quote, clerk, that we then apply. We are looking for somebody who we know can do X, Y, or Z tasks. So I think that the typical tasks as outlined is descriptive enough. And then it's up to us to judge how well they are qualified to what we know the job actually requires.
All right, Ms. Evans.
So just a couple of questions. So if we just added "and clerk" and, looked at the classification, we would or would not have to go back out. We could still have the resumes that we have in hand if we just added the "and clerk."
I think what we have to do is, if it is the desire of the board to add executive assistant and clerk to the school board, we'll have to go to classification and say, how quickly can this occur? I mean, I can't sit here today and say it can happen tomorrow. We really need to get a sense of how long that would take.
But do we know that we would not need to go back out and re-advertise, or do we not know we do not know the answer, or we do know we would not have to?
We could keep the current advertisement because it's not going to change the function of the job.
Okay, so we wouldn't have to start from scratch in any event.
No,
wouldn't have to start from scratch. And then just the other question is, we have typical tasks there, but the typical tasks are not, it says illustrative only. So we could, I'm looking at that last sentence too and saying oversees the administrative activities and operations assigned to the school board office. One could read that as runs the school board office. You could read it that way. And I'm just thinking, because it says illustrative only, we can always presumably add to that. As if other functions come up, we can add to that. As we go along, because it says illustrative only.
The other document that was in here that's related to the performance evaluation, these are the performance expectations. You can actually get very specific in here, because what this is used is for the evaluation piece. And quite frankly, can be similar job titles in different departments, or the same, or even in the same departments, but their performance expectations could be different, as long as they still meet the job specifications.
So the performance expectations, to build on what Sean is saying, is where you really get specific about what it is you expect this person to do. Mm-hmm. Okay? So if you look at those bulleted items, that's where you can really hone in and say that the expectation is that this person manage all administrative functions of the school board office, just, to build upon what's in the spec.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Ms. Schultz.
So I have a question then. Under that takeaway that you could build it further back in, the back information, do you not still, when you say executive assistant to the school board and 6 years of experience, are you not putting out a mating call, if you will, for a certain caliber of candidate? It's like in political speak for my colleagues, since we're in the season, it's like asking somebody for $100 who would write you a check for $2,000. They're offended that you would ask for so little, and you're in the wrong, you're playing in the wrong ball game if you're doing that. And so, the 6 years and executive assistant, people who are reading that job description, that says something to them. Does it not?
Are you saying that you think it should require more years of experience? I just want to make sure I'm clear on.
I just think that we're connoting something in messaging what this position is that doesn't really comport with what, in fact, the position is. And I think that affects who is likely to apply.
That's what you're saying.
Like we won't know who doesn't apply because we will never get their applications, because they'll say, well, six years. I've been doing this for 18 years. And run an office of X, Y, and Z, and they don't want anybody running an office. It doesn't say anything about running the school board office. And 6 years, they're willing to pay somebody, or they're willing to hire somebody who's has 6 years of gradually increasing experience. They're not looking for a seasoned employee. Mm-hmm. And so I think it doesn't say what we're looking for.
Okay. We have 3 issues on the board here, I think. One is adding clerk to the title. The second is, I think the majority of people have now stated, well, I'm not going to make assumptions. I'm going to ask a show of hands to see if there's anything, but I think we have figured out that between the wording, some of it's at the end, and what Ms. Evans said, because it's for illustrative purposes only, that it does say that they manage the school board office in the typical task description. And now Ms. Schultz is talking about the experience level of education, or experience level or skills under education. So let's just take these one at a time, and I want to, and we can talk about each one so we can move on and get done and get started to our closed session. So the first one, we have heard from our staff here in HR that while this will take time to go to classification, they don't think it will take long, and we need to find out, and since we believe Ms. Goddard is using clerk in her title currently, but we need confirmation of that, that will be easy to add, and relatively easy, we think, and so do I see agreement to adding that as long as it doesn't impede the process, adding clerk to the title? Could I see a show of hands? Significant. Okay. All right, so we'll do that. And if you all can get back to us as soon as possible on that one. Under typical tasks, is there any wordsmithing that anybody feels crucial? And then again, this may impede the process. And right now we are on track to start interviewing mid-July, at least with these, these resumes that we have. And we can still interview those people even if we choose to, wordsmith, whatever you want to say to the typical tasks. So I would like to see, Mr. Stark, just I'll let you speak in a moment before I take a
just going
vote.
to suggest one word change would satisfy me.
Okay.
I don't think it means you have to go out and reclassify and spend weeks doing that.
All right. What does
The
that
last
word?
line, it says, in typical tasks, it says, and oversees. If you just change that word to manage, I think it's clear. It says, and manages the administrative activities and operations assigned to the school board office. I agree. And that would be fine with me. I think that takes care of any, lack or disclarity that is already in here. Because right before that it says manages the school board office
Okay.
budget, so
And what do our HR professionals think? They think that's insignificant, that can be added quick, that can be changed, and not a problem. Okay. All right, do I see a show of hands to change in the last line under typical tasks from it would read, let me see, from the semicolon, manages the school board office budget, and change overseas to manages the administrative activities and operations assigned to the school board office, changing that. Do I see support for hands for that?
Can we add personnel, administrative personnel and activities? Because that's really the thing, is it's not just the activities, it's the people.
Yeah,
They
good
manage the
point.
people.
sure.
Managing people is different than managing stuff. It's a different skill set.
She's suggesting after that, so the sentence would read, and manages the administrative personnel and activities and operations assigned to the school board office. There's a couple ands there, but I
Or
think
it could
that's
just
okay.
say the personnel, administrative activities, and operations assigned. So you could put personnel before administrative activities. Manages the personnel, comma, administrative activities and operations assigned to the school board office.
So I have a question. Does Pam evaluate
Yes.
all of the EAAs? Okay, just wanted to be, someone said no.
Yes. Well, no, she's responsible, but she doesn't evaluate. It's, right.
I think she only evaluated Lizette and Yvette. So, but right, so
Right.
she doesn't, but not, yeah, she manages the supervisors, but she doesn't manage
The whole
it ever,
staff.
yeah.
I just want us to be careful about that wording, because if she doesn't evaluate and supervise all EAAs in the office, it could change the function of her.
Ms. Strauss.
Okay, in the next paragraph, it says that she does. Supervision received and given, receives general supervision, supervises, evaluates, instructs, and assists lower graded employees.
As
She
assigned.
signs the evaluations. Yeah, and she signs off on the other evaluations. So I think that the
Correct.
answer is yes. Yeah, she signs them, because whoever does, ultimately, there has to be a signature at the bottom of the form.
Okay.
And Pam, or the clerk, who is head of the office, I believe, signs the form. Is that right? Right, I know. KP?
So am I hearing,
Yes, yes. Yeah, she ultimately has to sign the form. And I believe, and that's what is contained in the next paragraph under supervision received given. Yeah, so.
so we're saying manages, at that very last sentence on typical tasks, manages the personnel, comma, administrative activities and operations assigned to the school board? Is that what I'm hearing? Okay. All right.
I want to see a show of hands. Is there, let's read that, Kathleen, again.
Sure. And manages the personnel, comma, administrative activities and operations assigned to the school board. Office, sorry, yeah.
All right, before I go, you want to say something before I vote?
Just want to ask, just to make sure that those additional wordings will not delay.
And that is what I would just have to get clarification. The changes that the initial changes of adding clerk, no, I do not believe will delay the process. The addition of manages the personnel, I also don't think that will necessarily change the process, because we're pretty much saying that. We're just not spelling it out so explicitly, right? So if we're saying that this person manages the administrative activities and operations, we could essentially say that incorporates personnel. So, but final word on this will be, we'll have to send this to D. Holly Brown, and I'm imagining, I know Sean is going to love this, we're just probably going to shoot something out to her tonight. We're going to say, how soon can you could we just insert this revised language into the advertisement and keep this process rolling?
Yes.
So that's what we're going to push for.
You know,
All right.
I will be able to support the changes in language so long as this does not
Doesn't
delay.
delay.
Because as far as I'm concerned, when somebody says this advertisement, we'll know what the clerk does. Otherwise, we'll not be applying for the position. That's my take.
Okay. All right. And so right now, I just want to see a general show of hands to the manages and adding personnel to that last, the last sentence in under typical tasks. Most people in favor of that? All right. And then Mr. Valkoff, you had a question or comment.
Yes, it's a comment. I think we've got scope creep here, because I thought the reason we were reviewing this stuff at all was because someone was concerned about the current description of the job and whether this particular current job description should continue to be advertised. And what we're doing now, as I see it, is we're sitting around and wordsmithing the description of the position, and we're actually not trying to change the position that's been advertised, and we're wanting to be extremely careful that we don't do that. So it would be my preference, actually, that we stop what we're doing, and whatever the process, whether it's going through governance or the chair works with HR and irons this out, but I don't think we should be doing what we're doing right now. I find this unproductive.
Ms. Strauss.
Well, I do support the minor tweaking, because I think that what we've tweaked is it reflects the job as we see it on the ground. So my assumption is, unless you let us know tomorrow morning that this puts everything off, then we might change our mind. But I don't think that these words are going to make a whole lot of difference, because I think it's implied already in here. And I know we have to go through all this other, but anyway, I would assume, unless this somehow means we start all over again, that this is easily done. But I would support making sure that this reflects truly what our clerk does.
Right. I think, and where we are right now, we have them looking at clerk, and we have them adding those two words to the last sentence, and that will, and if you will just give me as the chair the authority to just, obviously I will inform you if this is going to make a big, if we're going to have to put screeching brakes on this to reclassify, then I'll come back to you, but otherwise we'll just move forward with that. And then the last thing that Ms. Schultz mentioned and Mr. Stork had mentioned, it was about the educational experience. So again, I just want to remind you what we got given this. We've got 18 BAs and 8 masters. So, and I do think if we do, I'm not going to speak. You can tell me if we tweak the educational experience, what will that do?
I would say no, because the ship has left the horse left the stall. So, how official is that language? Meaning, we've started a process and have told a group of applicants what the requirements are. So to at this point say, and now you need a PhD, I think you would not want to go in that direction.
Okay, Mr. Moon.
Just out of curiosity, I was looking at some other job posts, job specifications with the same grade, US 28, that they all seem to have, so far, ones I checked, I've been checking, so far I've checked like 6, 7 of them, or have 6 years of progressive, as it is stated right here, exactly the same requirement.
The exact same wording.
Yeah,
Yes.
for the US 28.
Yes. And that was the advice, we got from HR when we were talking about moving forward and posting this, when Ms. Goddard and I sat down. So, Ms. Schultz.
So I agree that, if Janie, with your commentary, I think was spot on, that you do it when we're advertising the position. This is actually, I think, a best practice this is the right time to be looking at this, as opposed to lengthening the process and referring it to governance. My objection to the 6 years was my objection in the entire beginning, that we should not have been advertising this when we got the cart before the horse, before we sat down and had this discussion. And on a 3 days notice, we could have had this meeting anytime since this was first discussed. So I understand, and I absolutely see your point, that changing the 6 years changes the underlying issue. And you keep bringing up, Tammy, the educational background qualifications of the individuals, not as much the work experience. And that's the 6 years to me isn't, we corrected and addressed the educational background in the posting, and I think that's important. But we'll see what this process holds, but I would like to put this as a next step, that governance do look at this on a going forward basis, and whether or not the 6 years does accurately reflect this, and it's not time sensitive, but whether or not this position really is a US 28 6 years with what we want to do. And it may be after we finish this process and see what we get. And it may be absolutely comes from governance that's accurate, but I wished we had had this conversation before we ever published the position, because then we would be having the latitude to have the conversation instead of stopping the process.
Do I have agreement for that? That people want to look at this, refer it to governance for future? Sandy?
Could I just ask for just a little bit of clarification on what you're asking for? You want governance to look at this and say, when we advertise a US 28, is this the appropriate experience we want? Is that what you're asking us to look at?
Not any US 28 is, the next time we go through this, would you say that the duties of what the clerk of the board,
Oh, specific to the clerk of the board.
specific to the clerk of the board?
Okay.
Ms. Strauss, and I want to
I
wrap
would
up in the
wait-
next 5
I
minutes.
would wait until we go through this process, because I am satisfied with what we have in here as the requirement for experience. I mean, we can, in a year's time, we can take a look at this again, but I'm not prepared to look at this right now. I would rather go on. So,
All right. So let's just see a show of hands for that one. Would you rather wait until this process is done to move along? That would be the first vote. Or would you rather refer it to governance at this point and have them talk about it specifically to the duties as they relate to the chair of the board? So first one. Yes.
Is this intended for some kind of action now, or just for future, to change it for the future? Okay.
All right. So all those to delay the process until after the clerk of the board position is done. All of those wanting to delay. Okay. So now you're delaying. Okay.
Oh, you wait.
Said it wasn't a time.
Okay.
It just,
All right.
at some point.
All right. So at some point we'll do
At
that.
some point going forward, and I said
All
after this process.
Madam
right.
Chair, Madam Chair, I don't know what you are deciding here. If are we deciding that we're gonna do this, or
No, we're not
so
doing
we're not
it for
doing
now.
it? Okay, thank you.
We're not doing it now. And so the last thing I want to try to run through is we will work, just so you know, I think after this conversation, unless something happens with the minor word additions and the adding of the clerk to the board, we should be on target for our early July to mid-July for, board members who are interested in participating in the resume screening, doing interview questions, with the first round of interviews scheduled mid to late July. So I will send something out in chairman's that will talk about that. And if there's no other questions, this work session is adjourned. Oh, before I do that, though, I have to make we have to go for a motion because we will be going in closed. So the board will now make a motion to go into a closed meeting to discuss and consider the employment and performance of a specific public officer pursuant to VA Code Section 2.2-3711A1. Do I have a motion? By Ms. Strauss, seconded by Ms. Smith. All those in favor? The motion is unanimous. We are now in closed session.